guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different. I want to talk about my Lyme disease. So first off, I just want to say this was like what drew me to YouTube to begin with. I think a lot of people use YouTube for music and funny videos, but this is the thing that really got me into following YouTubers, was people talking about their story with Lyme disease, because I'll get into it a little bit later, but it's kind of a really difficult disease to have for so many reasons, not just the physical and mental and emotional disturbances. There are just so many social and political even problems with Lyme disease. So I just also want to start out by saying I'm not a doctor, and don't take anything that I say as like medical advice or anything like that. This is just my experience, and these are things that I've also learned via the web and documentaries and interviews and lectures that have been posted online. So yeah, let's just get right into it. My dog's walking in the background, so if you hear like little footsteps, that's my dachshund, Gunner, and my newborn, well, she's 3 months old now. She's right here. She doesn't want to nap right now, so I hope this is gonna work. So what is Lyme disease? It is an infection, a bacterial infection, Borrelia burgdorferi, and it's a spirochete bacteria, so it's kind of shaped like a corkscrew. It's also classified as a persister bacteria, which means that it uses its corkscrew shape to penetrate any kind of tissue. So it's found everywhere, in the blood, in every organ. It loves collagen, it loves getting into your skin even, anywhere really, and that's one reason why it's so hard to treat. Other persister bacterias are tuberculosis, leprosy, and this disease isn't too far off from syphilis. The infection is usually transmitted via vector, which in this case is a black-legged tick. There are other species that carry Lyme disease, and there are really other insects that carry it, but the mainstream belief is that it's transmitted through a black-legged tick. They found bacteria in semen, and they've also found that it can get to the fetus when you're pregnant. So there are a lot of ways you can get this disease. It's so much more common than mainstream would like you to believe. And one reason why it's so controversial is there are two societies. One is IDSA, and that's Infectious Diseases of America, or Disease Society of America. And then there's ILADS, which is International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society. Now the two are kind of at odds. IDSA likes to say that Lyme disease is extremely hard and rare to get, and it's also very easy to treat. And ILADS likes to say quite the opposite. The CDC recently came forward and said, well, we think that it's actually 10 times more likely than we previously thought. So who really knows the number, but it's been found in every state now. I'm in California, by the way. I have been to the East Coast, which is what every doctor will ask you if you say you have Lyme disease. The first thing they'll ever say is, oh, have you been to the East Coast? Or have you been hiking? I believe I was infected in Orange County when I would hike. Who really knows how I got this? I believe that I've had symptoms since I was really, really young, and it's just hard to say, when I was infected. Dr. Richard Horowitz is my favorite doctor, who's kind of just, he's like the king of Lyme disease right now, and he's talks about getting so many hits throughout your life. So, it's very possible that most people carry a few bacteria, but their immune system is able to kind of fight it off, and they don't get any symptoms. So if you're immunocompromised, this is what really shows up. I also want to talk about associated diseases, so co-infections. Other ones that have been found in my body are Babesia and Bartonella. Babesia is actually not a bacteria, it's a malaria-like parasite, blood parasite. It's discovered usually people who don't have a spleen or people that have compromised immune systems, because the spleen kind of cleans out the blood, and if you don't have a spleen, then you're in trouble if you have Babesia. It's very fatal. And Bartonella is also a bacteria that you may have heard of, cat scratch fever. Well, that's a real thing. I took in a kitten that was on the streets in North Hollywood, and it scratched me a bunch of times, you know, just playing or whatever. And every time the cat scratched me, I would get a sore throat, and the whole next day I would just have a low-grade fever, and I just kind of wouldn't feel good. And my lymph nodes would get swollen, and I would just say, oh, that's weird, I wonder if that's cat scratch fever. Well, it went away, my body fought it off. Wrong. Your body can fight it off, but the disease doesn't go away. The bacteria doesn't go away. And once you come to a point in your life where there's trauma, such as, let's say, a car accident, or you move into a moldy building like I did, it just, everything runs rampant, and that's when people finally discover they're sick, if they ever discover they're sick. There are loads of other co-infections that come along through the tick bite. There's one called anaplasmosis. I've been tested for so many things, you name it. Zika virus, I've been tested for dengue fever, things that are all in the United States, mostly the southern states. I'm in Southern California, and I came up negative for those viruses, thankfully. So what I'm really dealing with is Lyme disease and Babesia and Bartonella. Who knows, there could be more in there, but this is what's presented itself and what has come up on blood tests. So Lyme disease was first discovered in Lyme, Connecticut. That's where the name comes from. It has nothing to do with a Lyme. Yeah, there were these people in this town of Connecticut, Lyme, Connecticut, and they started having the same symptoms, and this woman was like really befuddled. She didn't know what this was all about, and they basically came to the conclusion that they found a bacteria. So that's where it gets its name. So I'm not even gonna get all into the controversy. I'll kind of skim the surface, but there's a lot of information out there. There's a great documentary called Under Our Skin. There's 2 parts, and they're both available for free if you have Amazon Prime. So you should really check those out if you think you have Lyme, or you know you have Lyme and you haven't heard of this documentary. It's really amazing. But I think what it comes down to is Lyme disease, it mimics so many other diseases like MS, ALS, lupus, just all of these autoimmune diseases. It is not super easy to treat, but at the same time, if it is caught early on and you're able to, you know, kill it with a round of antibiotics, or, you know, if you know what the root cause of the problem is, it's going to ultimately be less cost for you and better health for you. Well, if you're diagnosed with MS, let's say, you're going to be put on multiple medications for the rest of your life, and there's just too much money to be made in autoimmune, incurable, lifelong diseases. So that's what I believe. Who really knows? There's so much controversy and argument over this disease. But so if you think you might have Lyme disease, if you go to the doctor because you feel like there's just something not right, and you just go to your regular doctor and they test you and they say, you're fine, that's usually an indicator that there's something going on like Lyme disease. And I really would encourage you to find an integrative specialist, a functional medicine doctor, a holistic doctor, someone that unfortunately insurance doesn't cover, and it's usually pricey, but your health is worth so much more than money. So I really encourage you to get tested at the very least. The regular test, so if you can even get your normal doctor, your general practitioner to test you for these things, if they even agree to it, they usually won't unless they see a bullseye rash, which is the hallmark symptom of Lyme disease. If they end up testing you, those tests are only 50% accurate, if that. So many people have this disease and they think they don't because they were tested by their doctor and their doctor said, no, you're fine. So there's something online you can download for free. It's called the MSIDS, Dr. Richard Horowitz questionnaire. It stands for multisystemic infectious disease. I believe. I have to double check that. But he believes it's a multisystemic disease, and there's so many other factors on how you get sick, why you get sick, heavy metals in the body, bacterial infections, viral infections, just so many environmental factors that go into Lyme disease and, you know, how people get sick. It's never really like, oh, there's just Lyme disease in your body. It's almost always there's some other stuff going on that you have to address in order to get better. And so functional medicine doctors that are Lyme literate will work on all of those points with you to help you get better. Also, if you go to the ILADS website, you can search in your area to find a Lyme doctor near you. And that's what I did. And thankfully, I found an amazing doctor in LA that has been treating me for the past year or so. So let's just go right into the symptoms. I know I'm going to miss some because the list is kind of ridiculous. It's like, if I could just write about all my symptoms, I'd be writing all day, just what I've experienced. But I went off of the MSIDS questionnaire and just kind of wrote them all down, and I'll explain those to you. So I guess I'll just kind of go back to my childhood and things that stuck out that are like just abnormal. I've been diagnosed with costochondritis so many times, and if you don't know what that means, it's basically like the inflammation of the cartilage in your rib cage area and around your heart. I've had this stabbing sensation in my heart happen so many times. It can be brought on by stress, but it's not always brought on by stress, and it just feels like someone's taking a really sharp, long needle and just poking me straight through the heart. And I've gone to the doctor, I've gone to the hospital, they've tested me, they've said EKG's fine, you're fine, you just have costochondritis. So that's something that I feel is a typical diagnosis for someone who has Lyme and doesn't know it. Another thing, bless you, bless you, bless you. Another thing is I've been diagnosed with exercise-induced asthma, and that started when I was, I believe, in 7th grade. It just out of nowhere, I would run during PE and I just couldn't catch my breath. It just everything feels so heavy, and it's just like such a workout to even breathe. So I got to be excused from some sports activities when I was younger because of it. Another thing I've always battled with is insomnia. I've just always had trouble sleeping, and when I was younger, I would have trouble sleeping, so I couldn't fall asleep all night, and then when I finally would fall asleep, I couldn't wake up, and I was just so fatigued all the time. Like, the mornings were the worst. My mom and I got in so many arguments just because, you know, she was like, how can you not get out of bed, you know? And I just wouldn't get out of bed. And at the time, no one knew what it was. I've also been diagnosed with major depression, and that just came out of nowhere. And I would cry myself to sleep every night around the time I was 12 or 13. And my mom would ask me, what's wrong? Why are you so sad? And I would not have an answer. I honestly didn't know. I was just so depressed and sad. Another thing that happened when I was younger is I would have these pains like in my shoulders to the point where I couldn't breathe, and it felt like my shoulder was dislocated, but I did nothing to bring it on, and it wouldn't happen like when I woke up. So I know it wasn't like because of the way I was sleeping or anything. I would just have these extreme pains deep in my joints, and it was just so unexplainable. I had lower back pain really bad when I was like 11, and there's just no reason an 11-year-old should have lower back pain. I remember I started taking Aleve like candy because it was so bad. And then I would also end up, I've always had GI problems, and I would end up in the nurse's office all the time because I just would have this like sharp stabbing pain. Sometimes I would have gas pains, but later on when I was 24 years old, I started getting this really terrible stomach pain, and it was just so bad, and I would just keel over in pain, and you know, I ended up in the hospital sometimes. One time in particular, they had to give me morphine because it was so bad, and they ran so many tests, and of course everything came up fine. I was totally fine, nothing was wrong. I even got a scope put down my stomach, and they couldn't find H. pylori, which usually causes ulcers, because that's what I thought I had. They said there was a lot of redness and irritation, but they didn't see any evidence of an ulcer. There's that. I mean, there's just so many things that a young girl shouldn't be experiencing, and a healthy young girl shouldn't be experiencing. Also, one time, we used to go hiking every weekend in Orange County with my dad and my aunt and my cousins. And we would take their dog Molly, their Dalmatian, with us, and there would be times when the dog was covered in ticks. I remember my dad had a tick on his leg, and I don't remember ever getting a tick, but I do remember now, around the same time, I had something in the back of my head, and I thought it was like a zit or something, and it was like so bad that I was embarrassed to even tell anyone about it. But I remember messing with it so much, it was like, it turned into like a boil, and it was super painful. And that's also when I started getting extremely debilitating headaches. So I think I was about 10 years old. And with that came a decline in my vision. So right around 10 years old, I had 20/20 vision, and it just started, my farsightedness just started decreasing, or you know, my ability to see far started decreasing, and I started having to wear glasses and contacts, and it's pretty much increasingly gotten worse until recently. It's actually hasn't gotten worse, and I've also been treated for Lyme. So those are the symptoms of when I was younger. So we'll go back about a year. After I was with my husband in Kansas, I started noticing other symptoms. It started really with this skin crawling sensation, and it was so intense. It just felt like there were things crawling on my skin. I felt this, what I believe now is a biofilm, and if you don't know what a biofilm is, it's basically this network of bacteria or even fungus or viruses or whatever that form this, basically this coating around any surface, and it becomes super strong. It becomes this really impenetrable seal basically over anything that the biofilm is on. So I just felt like my skin was enveloped with something, and no matter what I would put on my skin, I just couldn't get that feeling off. It was just so intense. I can't even explain to you guys how annoying, and it just drove me nuts. It drove me completely nuts. And yes, sometimes I felt like a crawling sensation as well. It was just pretty constant, and sometimes it would be really painful. So that's the first time. So when I was in Kansas, that's when I first noticed it, and it was just like, I didn't know what it was from. I had no clue. I just thought I was like going crazy, or I had gotten fleas or something. I don't know what it was. And then when I got home, I started getting my lymph nodes under my armpit started swelling, and I could feel them, like they were really painful. These were swollen as well. I was getting fevers every day, low-grade fevers, but fevers no less, so anything around 100 degrees, sometimes just 99, sometimes 100, sometimes 101. I would get these fevers and these night sweats and day sweats that were just so bizarre. My body would just be drenched in sweat. I had no idea what was going on. I went to urgent care. They tested my breasts to see if I maybe had breast cancer, and they just were like, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what this is. You know, most people that are diagnosed with Lyme have seen multiple doctors before they were able to find out what was wrong. So that's another reason I'm doing this video, is to hopefully help someone that is going through this as well. Hi, monkey. I'm gonna have her in my lap. Okay. So yeah, unexplained fevers, sweats, and chills. That's what was really happening right away. Another thing that happened right from the gate was all my joints started hurting really bad. Like I would get these knee swollen and achy joints in my knees, elbows, fingers, basically any joint you could think of, and it would migrate. It wouldn't just stay in my knees. One day it would be in both of my knees. The next day it would be in my right elbow and my left foot. It was totally bizarre and unpredictable. So that's also like a hallmark symptom of Lyme disease. Fatigue, tiredness. I could sleep for 24 hours straight if I wasn't disturbed. I also had trouble sleeping. I lost so much weight out of nowhere. Hair loss. I started losing all of my hair to the point where, yeah, I probably had like half of what I have now. My stomach was always upset, always either constipation or diarrhea, something like that, always, all the time. Loss of libido. So a hallmark symptom of the babesiosis is shortness of breath, which I definitely was having. Also along with the night sweats, day sweats and night sweats, that's really typical of babesia infection. The babesia basically destroys your red blood cells. So I went to a very well-renowned medical center here in Los Angeles, and I won't say the name. I went to an infectious disease doctor before I went to see a Lyme literate doctor, and they basically told me I was fine. The woman just looked me up and down and said, "You don't have Lyme disease." That was her diagnosis just by looking at me. And then also these blood tests came back, and they showed there was something really wrong with my blood. It was showing that I was anemic, like extremely anemic, and I had like a high white blood cell count. It was just really off, and they said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. They even tested me for valley fever, came up negative. Yeah, doctors just don't look for Lyme. It actually wasn't until I went to a dermatologist, a great dermatologist that I love, and she was the first person to say, do you think you might have Lyme disease? And that's when a light bulb kind of went off in my head, and that's when I found these videos on YouTube, and that's also when I found iLads, and I was able to find a doctor. I've always had heart palpitations and pulse skips. You know, I could just put my hand over my heart, and since I was pretty young, I could always feel like some sort of abnormality. There would always be like a 5-second pause between the next heartbeat. So I know that's not normal. Or it would just go really fast all of a sudden. Muscle pain and cramps. This was really bad, especially in my legs. There was one point in time when I couldn't even get to work because my hip joints, like the ball and socket joints, were in so much pain that I would have to crawl downstairs, like army crawl downstairs to make coffee, and sometimes I would make it to work, but it was just so bad I couldn't even get out of bed, really. Stiffness in the neck cracks, that's another very common symptom. Twitching face. I started getting these facial twitches and it was very bizarre. It started happening towards the end, and that's when you know that the Lyme disease has entered your central nervous system. So I guess I'll just talk about a few central nervous system symptoms. I lost the ability to concentrate. I would word search all the time. I still do, where a word that I've said my whole entire life, like something as simple as apple, I would just sit there and have to think about it for a really long time. Sometimes I would write something, and when I looked down at the paper, it would be something totally different than what I wanted to write. I just became so, I wasn't even able to read emails towards the end when I was working. It was just too much information for me to take in. I was unable to drive, like driving, which is so second nature to me, which I've been doing way longer than I'm legally supposed to have been driving. I would just freeze sometimes, and I couldn't stay straight on the road. It was just really hard to drive and do anything that was like second nature to me before. Another central nervous system thing is Bell's palsy. Now, I did not get Bell's palsy, and if you don't know what that is, it's when half of your face basically stops working. And right after I got with my now husband, he got Bell's palsy, and it was very bizarre. Just out of nowhere, the one side of his face stopped working, and he ended up seeing a Chinese doctor and getting treatment. He started getting treatment for that, and it went away, thankfully. Poor balance, or confusion, difficulty thinking, getting lost. I would just drive somewhere where I always knew where to go, and I would just get lost, and I'd have to pull over and just think of where I was. So then when it starts hitting your peripheral nervous system, I started getting numbness and tingling, just so many bizarre symptoms, mood swings, motion sickness, and vertigo. I mean, I've always loved to go on roller coasters, and after a while, I just couldn't. I would get so sick, and my head would hurt, and I just couldn't understand why. Out of nowhere, I just couldn't do roller coasters anymore. Tinnitus was really, really bad. Yeah, I just started having trouble, you know, with sounds and lights. I would start getting really sensitive to light and sound, which is another classic symptom of Lyme disease. So like I said, I probably missed so many symptoms because it really, like I said, it gets into every part of your body. So of course you're gonna have symptoms everywhere, because it gets everywhere. It gets into your brain, it gets into your heart, it gets anywhere. So I really hope this video has helped at least one person. That's kind of my goal. I'm gonna keep doing videos centered around Lyme disease. I'll probably do a video about my routine as far as my treatment, anything else that I find relevant to my life right now. If you found this video and you like it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you have not. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.